Good evening. It's always a treat to read these new papers that I write. And I want to make sure that I get the principles down too. A good way to do that is to find articles written by the science propaganda that overview, say, hey, well, these scientists, they can't figure out, how these objects form. And that's a good lead into developing the principles. And two of the principles stick out really strongly with the most recent discovery, NGTS-1b. This paper is strong support for the mass independence and coherency principles of the general theory of stellar metamorphosis. And on the abstract, let's see, that's a big title. Look at that. The abstract, the discovery of NGTS-1b strongly supports the principles of mass independence and coherency of stellar evolution and formation according to the general theory. Explanation along with a link to the original discovery paper showing the issues is provided. The principle of mass independence stems directly from the coherency principle of stellar metamorphosis, and the coherency principle is this. When a star is born, its remains are incoherent particles that cannot form anything of significant size, as stellar birthing is too violent to allow for the classical mode of planet formation in a protoplanetary disk. That summed it up big time. When a star is born, it's too fucking violent. It's too crazy. How do you form anything left over from the star when it's that violent? There's nothing left over to form anything of significant size when a star is born. I mean, look at the Earth. The Earth, this giant differentiated object. There's no way the Earth came from the sun's remains after it was born. That just doesn't make any sense at all. That's why I had to do the coherency, because nothing coherent comes from a star being born except the star itself. It's very straightforward here. And secondly, since stellar birth does not leave anything left over, then assuming objects which orbiting stars were formed as the cause of the host being born is misguided. The principle of mass independence is thus: the masses of stars are independent of each other when they are first formed and when they are first born. The object that orbits NGTS-1 is very, very large in comparison to the host, as well orbits at extreme velocity and closeness to the host. It orbits in like a little over 2 days. A little over 2 days is a complete year on this thing. It's way, way, way closer than Mercury is to the sun. It is clear that the general theory is supported by this discovery. NGTS-1 and 1b are not related to by formation. This meaning they are actually two mutually exclusive stars in different stages to their evolution. One of the stars simply captured the other via a third object, which allowed transfer of angular momentum. This means another prediction can be made, and that the object which transferred its angular momentum to allow capture is either orbiting further out from the red dwarf, or was completely ejected from the system. This is why rogue objects exist to their Jupiter-sized. So it's just a game of angular momentum loss and gain. That's all it is. There's no reason to make 1b and 1 the same ages or formed at the same time. I mean, basically that means the same thing. Or in the same vicinity or in their current orbits. They came from somewhere else in the galaxy. They're completely mutually exclusive objects. Just because they orbit each other now doesn't mean it was always like that. So forcing them to be the same age, and forcing them to form where they formed, and forcing them to conform to what establishment science says is true, is just going to lead to more and more confusion. That's all it's going to lead to, is more and more confusion. I linked the discovery paper, which is on archive.org, and I linked the principle of mass independence and dependence paper on the bottom, which is linked to VIXRA, and the coherency principle, which is linked to VIXRA as well. That's basically it. You guys go ahead and read this paper over. I want to start taking the misguided paradigm and correcting the observations with principles of stellar evolution that are actually coherent and not based off of 17th and 18th century I don't know what you would call it. I won't even call it theory. It wasn't even really a hypothesis. I don't even know what to call past ideas concerning this. I guess nothing, really. All right, later, y'all.